very good evening to all our viewers. You're watching Primetime News on TV1. For the News First team, I'm Yuki Portia. Before we head into your stories in detail, let's start off with a look at tonight's headline. Buddhists mark Navam Full Moon Poya Day, final day of Gangarama Navam Perihara tonight. Disconnect power supply to large-scale power consumers to allow use of generators, PUCSL tells the CEB. CPC seeks formula to increase fuel prices. Woman shot dead by two armed men in Matugama. Sri Lanka's COVID-19 cases on the rise. Has the US shifted its stance on Russia's invasion of Ukraine? Starting off with your top story tonight, the Public Utilities Commission has informed the Ceylon Electricity Board to disconnect power supply to large-scale power consumers by allowing them to use their generators. Now, its chairman Janaka Ratnaik has said these consumers would be paid 36 rupees for every unit of power obtained through those generators.
The Public Utilities Commission yesterday submitted an alternative plan after it rejected the Ceylon Electricity Board's request to impose power cuts for 3 months. This includes reducing hydropower generation by 50%, direct large-scale power consumers to use generators if ACs are required from 6 to 10 p.m, reducing electricity consumption in the state sector, and reducing electricity consumption in local government authorities by 80%. The Ceylon Electricity Board said it had not received the recommendations of the PUCSL even by this afternoon. The ZEB's General Manager Dr. Rohanta Abesekara said the PUCSL's recommendations are impractical. He added that it is the recommendation on hydropower management that must make recommendations on limiting hydropower generation. The CEB General Manager noted that it would be practical to disconnect power supply to ACs and request the private sector to use generators. However, he said there would be practical issues in monitoring whether the recommendations are being implemented. The CEB General Manager said that operations in some buildings cannot run without air conditioners. The CEB Engineers Union commented on this matter today.
They say that 300 megawatts must be obtained somehow from the private sector, but if the private sector doesn't give it, then there will be a big problem. According to their recommendations, we have to reduce hydropower generation by 5 gigawatt hours. Otherwise, we won't be able to meet the demand. We should preserve water at hydropower stations until we receive rainfall by the end of April. We won't be able to do that. If we can't do it, then the country will have to face a massive crisis. If we don't have hydropower plants, then we would need thermal power plants. But we don't receive fuel even to run thermal power plants. There is an issue with these guidelines because it seems that no one has considered the practical aspect of this. But
the Public Utilities Commission says its recommendations are practical. We must implement this first to identify whether it's practical or not. We said instead of opting for island-wide power cuts, it is practical to disconnect power supply to large-scale consumers. Many institutions in Sri Lanka, including the media, run operations on generators after obtaining the fuel required for it. Some are asking whether this will create a fuel shortage. But there won't be a fuel shortage because the fuel shortage has arisen as the CEB doesn't have dollars to obtain fuel from the CPC. News First made inquiries on whether hydropower generation has been reduced by half based on the recommendations of the Public Utilities Commission. The director of the Water Management Secretariat, Engineer Nilantha Dhanapala, said they would release water for hydropower generation until October.
The power crisis in Sri Lanka aggravated after power plants ran out of fuel to generate electricity. Now, long queues of vehicles were seen at filling stations in the country in the last 24 hours. This has caused a shortage of fuel in some areas. The Ceylon Petroleum Corporation has informed the Ceylon Electricity Board to find dollars and pay for the fuel it purchases to generate power. This demand, along with others, such as the need for the CEB to settle its debt, came as the dollar crisis worsened in the country, affecting essential imports. A tanker carrying 40,000 metric tons of diesel purchased from the Indian Oil Corporation on a 60-day credit reached Sri Lanka yesterday. However, queues of vehicles were seen at some filling stations in the country during the last 24 hours. Our cameras captured some of these queues at filling stations in Valisara, Kurunegala and Dambulla today. Some filling stations in Nugegoda, Kiripatgoda, Kadawatha and Mathura have run out of diesel. There was a shortage of diesel at a filling station in Dalupatha in Nigambo, where vehicles were queued up this afternoon. We came across one filling station in Kirulapana that had run out of octane 95 petrol and an IOC filling station in Paliagoda that had run out of diesel, octane 95 and octane 92 petrol. The Sipetco filling station in Ganemulla remained closed today. However, there were no fuel shortages at filling stations in Badulla, Polonnaruwa and Anuradhapura.
There were queues of people at filling stations since yesterday. The reason for that is those who run the fuel stations have stored more fuel at their storage facilities. Fuel prices haven't been increased, although we requested for it. People too have bought excess fuel as a buffer stock. The shortage might have occurred due to these reasons. We have already supplied the required fuel to the filling stations. We have stored enough fuel at our main storage terminals. There is no need for the people to stay in queues to obtain fuel.
The CPC chairman also commented on whether prices will be increased.
The CPC faces a loss of 50 rupees for every litre of diesel and 17 rupees for every litre of petrol. We submitted a proposal to the Energy Ministry to raise these prices in a way that we can at least make neither profits nor losses. They must hold a discussion with us regarding this. Yesterday, the minister said that fuel prices haven't been increased. Revising prices once in 6 months isn't enough. They must pay attention to this and revise fuel prices once a month or once in 3 months. They must introduce a mechanism to decide on fuel prices and implement it. If fuel prices aren't increased by February, we expect our losses to stand at around 11 billion rupees.
A ship carrying 40,000 metric tons of diesel from India arrived in Sri Lanka yesterday. Opposition lawmakers have criticized the conduct of government ministers who visited the port to welcome the tanker.
After 2 years have passed under this government, they say that it would have been better if they had Mangala Samaraveera's fuel price formula. Gamampilla is to table a proposal on that to the cabinet. It's better late than never. The government must make a policy decision based on fuel prices. While formulating the fuel price formula, I believe that everyone must support that. This includes the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation, IOC, Treasury, the Central Bank and the groups representing the consumers. Yesterday we saw an Indian oil tanker reaching Sri Lanka. The ministers who went there with the High Commissioner behaved as if India is giving it to us free of charge. None of the ministers in this country have accompanied High Commissioners and gone to welcome consignments that are imported to the country while paying for it. We have to pay India for 40,000 metric tons of diesel and petrol in 2 months. Tell the people the cost at which a barrel was imported. The betel leaves also know that this is not an act of welfare. This is why we saw the betel leaves falling from his hands. It will be easy for the Trade Minister, Finance Minister and the Energy Minister to reside in the quarters there. Then they can visit the ports every morning and wait for all the ships that come there.
The Hindu newspaper has reported that Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa is to pay his second visit to India in 2 months. We will receive $2.4 billion from India. We would be able to reap many benefits by integrating the economies of Sri Lanka and India. Opposition parliamentarian Partli Champika Ranawaka met with India's High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, Gopal Bagle, today. He was joined by some members of his 43rd Brigade movement. The members of the movement said that the meeting with the High Commissioner was successful.
Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa says the Samagi Janabala Wege was successful in preventing the government from imposing the 25% surcharge tax on the EPF.
The government continues to shower you with gifts. They gave the gift of fertilizer, exploding gas cylinders and exorbitant price hikes. The latest addition is power cuts. They came into power promising to ensure national security. Today the people have to stay safe from the government. Today there is no freedom of speech and the freedom to criticize. If someone speaks the truth, they are arrested and remanded. This government is attempting to rob the insurance and savings of the public by imposing a 25% surcharge tax on the profits of the EPF and ETF. The finance minister, with 7 brains, is saying that the EPF and ETF won't be included in this taxation. How did the government reach this point? It is us in the Samagi Janabala Wege that raised our voice on behalf of the EPF of the people.
The
opposition leader expressed these views during an event to distribute hospital equipment worth 2.9 billion rupees to the Samanture base hospital under the Vipakshen Husmak program.
Woman shot dead at her residence. The annual Navam Mahaperahara of the Hunupitiya Ganga Rama Temple is parading Colombo on its final day tonight.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa placed the casket of the sacred tooth relic on The Navam Mahaperahara of the Gangarama Temple is a key event in the Buddhist calendar.
The appointment of the 2 chief disciples of Gautama Buddha as Agrashavaka, namely Sariputta and Muggallana, took place on a day like today, on the eve of the first Navam full moon Poya day. After the enlightenment of Gautama Buddha, there were more than 1,250 disciples in the order of Mahasangha. The Navam Poya also commemorates the first ever Buddhist council held 3 months after the death of Lord Buddha. It was here where the Vinaya, the code of fundamental ethics for Buddhist monks, was proclaimed based on the teachings that the Buddha had passed on to his disciples. Religious observances were held in temples across the island in accordance with health regulations. Special religious ceremonies and pujas were held with the attendance of a large number of devotees at the temple of the sacred tooth relic in Kandy. The 219th edition of the Amadam Sisilata Dhamma sermon was held at the Prime Minister's official residence under the patronage of Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. The war was fought with the blessings of all the people and the support of all the military units in the country given to the current Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. However, the war wasn't a massacre committed by King Kosol. They made the right decisions and engaged in the war by protecting the people. Today, the people in the country are listening to a sermon peacefully and travelling freely because of our president who showed great leadership at that time. The Siri Sadaham Sita Dhamma sermon was held at the opposition leader's office today. Always keep trying. Don't procrastinate. Control your eyes, ears, nose and mouth. Learn to control yourselves properly. Let us control all these earthly desires. When we do that, we will be able to build a good country to live. A puja was held at the Shakya Malakya opposite the Capital Maharaja head office. The puja was organized by the staff of Bulletin, a subsidiary of the Capital Maharaja group.
Welcome back to the news. On to another headline-making story tonight. Special security has been put in place in Mathugama after a 37-year-old woman was shot dead last night. On our Crime Watch segment tonight, we take a look at the sequence of incidents that led to the killing.
Crime Watch.
Date 15th of February 2022. Time 9 p.m. Two armed men wearing full-face helmets have shot a woman to death after breaking into a house along Gamini Mavata in Mathugama. Police said the two men who broke into the house last night had fired 5 gunshots at the owner of the house. They had also opened fire at a woman. Security camera footage showed the two men leaving the house after the shooting. The 37-year-old woman, who is a mother of 3, had died of her injuries at the location. Her husband had told the police that he had hid in a room with 2 of the children upon hearing his wife's screams. Police said the two men had fired 5 gunshots at the door of the room and that 6 bullet casings of a T-56 firearm were found at the crime scene. Police officers, including from the Mathugama police station and the Kalutara crimes branch, had arrived at the location afterwards. Police suspect that last night's shooting might have been a result of a clash between 2 underworld groups in Mathugama. They say that details have emerged about the woman's husband's connection to an attack at a financial institution on the 9th of this month. Investigations have revealed that security cameras had been installed at the house 3 days ago. Special police protection has been deployed to the area since last night's shooting. The police are investigating the incident under the supervision of SSP Kapila Premadasa.
Crime Watch.
Moving on, police say they have recorded 49 statements over the attack on the residence of journalist Chambudita Samaravikrama. They are yet to arrest the suspects involved in the incident.
Police teams are examining the security camera footage to locate the vehicle used by the group that attacked the residence of journalist Chambudita Samaravikrama.
මෙම අපරාධ ස්ථානයට පැමිණි වෑන් රථය සහ යතුරු පැදිය එම ස්ථානයට
We have examined the CCTV footage from 86 locations to identify the exit and entry routes of the motorbike and the van that was seen at the crime scene. The Casbah Magistrates Court has instructed investigation officers to consider sending the CCTV footage to the Morutu University and to examine it using the latest equipment there. Further investigation activities will take place accordingly.
සොයා බැලීම සඳහා කැස්බෑව ගරු මහේත්‍රාත් අධිකරණය මගින් නියෝගයක් ලබා ගන්න ලැබුවා. ඒ අනුව විමර්ශන කටයුතු තවදුරටත් සිදු කරනු ලබනවා.
Lawyers of the Jatika Jana Balawega expressed the following views regarding the incident.
චමුදිත සමරවික්‍රම නැමැති මාධ්‍යවේදියාගේ නිවසට
The residence of journalist Chamudita Samaravikrama was attacked with stones and fecal matter. Previously, a rally of the Jatika Jana Balawega was attacked by eggs on the 30th of January. This has become a chain of events. The police didn't serve justice over this incident. The Minister of Public Security did not intervene in this matter. In the case of the egg attack, 2 people were arrested and handed over to the Nitambo police. However, the police handed over those 2 suspects to the Watapitibala hospital, leaving behind their responsibility. The 2 suspects are now walking free. They have not been produced in courts. In our complaints, we have highlighted that armed groups of criminals are behind this egg attack. The residence of journalist Chamudita Samaravikrama was attacked with stones and fecal matter. The window on the top floor was attacked by a culprit with precise intentions. He must be properly trained. Where do trained criminals come from?
හොඳට ට්‍රේන් වෙච්ච කෙනෙක් වෙන්න. එහෙම ට්‍රේන් වෙච්ච අය ඉන්නේ උදවිය ඉන්නේ කොහෙද?
මම පැහැදිලිව කියන්න. ඔය චමුදිතගේ ගෙදරට ප්‍රහාර එල්ල කරගාපු කට්ටිය හොයාගන්නේ නැහැ.
They will not look into the whereabouts of the culprits behind the attack of journalist Chamudita Samaravikrama, just like the previous incidents. They came with a pistol. They had planned the attack. They came with a weapon and held the security officer at gunpoint. But what does this symbolize? Today the courts are begging the government to produce the perpetrators behind this. The truth is that they have an iron fist protecting them. Remember that this is the beginning. The situation will worsen in the future.
And make no mistake, the United States will defend every inch of NATO territory with the full force of American power. An attack against one NATO country is an attack against all of us.
The Organization to Protect Freedom submitted a letter to the UN envoy to Sri Lanka today. They say the government is attempting to suppress civil activists seeking justice over the April 21st attacks.
The Organization to Protect Freedom has said the government has failed to arrest the perpetrators of the April 21st attacks. Shiranta Amarasinghe then expressed these views to the media.
We saw the charge that was filed yesterday. The charge read as creating disaffection among the general public. We need to know what the government did to create any pressure among the people. The Attorney General has failed to arrest the mastermind behind the April 21st attacks or to implement the recommendations of the commission that was appointed to probe the April 21st attacks. However, when we seek justice for the victims, the Attorney General is trying to charge us under Section 120.
Meanwhile, the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka says it supports the abolition of the Prevention of Terrorism Act. Calls have been mounting from human rights bodies to amend the law ahead of this month's UN Human Rights Council sessions. The Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka has told diplomats this week that it supports the repeal of the Prevention of Terrorism Act. It said terrorism should be investigated under the general law by making necessary amendments. In a statement, the HRCSL said it is also advocating amendments to the Human Rights Commission Act to achieve greater transparency. It added that it will implement a national preventive mechanism under which there will be regular visits of suspects to prevent torture. The Commission also said it is also advocating for retrials of rejected appeals instead of presidential pardon. It noted that a project is being designed to address issues of plantation workers.
Tamil National Alliance MP M.A. Sumathiran has criticised the amendments to the Prevention of Terrorism Act.
The members of the current Human Rights Commission were appointed by the current regime. So it makes it all the more significant that the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka, after so many years, has taken this decision that this draconian law must be repealed in toto. We don't accept the so-called amendment that has been presented to Parliament by the Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs. It makes no difference on the ground whatever. The repeal of this act will see all communities in Sri Lanka coming together, at least after 40 odd years, having realized the grave injustice that has been meted out to several youth.
The MP made these remarks during a signature campaign launched by the Justice for All movement in Jaffna, demanding the PTA to be repealed.
The Sri Lanka Young Journalists Association has requested the UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet to study Sri Lanka's proposed data protection law. The Sri Lanka Young Journalists Association has raised concerns over the Personal Data Protection Bill that was tabled in Parliament last month. In a letter to UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet, they said the bill compromises the rights of journalists and limits the enjoyment of right to information. They said it also grants power to conduct inquiries and issues punishments by an institution that is not a court of law. The request to UN Human Rights Chief comes days ahead of the UN Human Rights Council session that is to begin on the 28th of this month.
Supporting rural education means building a nation's future. And together with the people of Sri Lanka, Gammadda is leading from the front. Development of preschools in Ramba Ava and Isin Basagama, both in rural Anuradhapura. A preschool developed in Attan Kadavala in the North Central Province. Clean drinking water for the children of the Maligathena School in Valimata, Bandarvela. A library for the youngsters at the Kumbuk Oya Rural School between rural Polonnaruwa and Matale. Clean water for school children in Hambegamua, Munragala. Classrooms for students at the primary school in Ralapanava, Anuradhapura. The complete development of the Sindati Mata School in Kalpitiya, Puttalam. These are a few examples of Gammadda's action and impact. Thanks to you, the people. Gammadda, by the people, for the people.
Why is Prince Andrew facing calls to be stripped of his title? In more news here at home, health officials say that most people infected by COVID-19 have not obtained the 3 vaccine doses. And they say infected middle-aged people are now requiring intensive care treatment due to their complications.
We have observed that most patients who develop symptoms are those who haven't obtained the 3 vaccine doses. We must protect ourselves. There are 2 ways to do that. The first is vaccination. The second is self-protection measures like wearing face masks. If we follow this, we will be able to continue working as usual.
Sri Lanka has recorded 9,831 COVID-19 cases in the last 7 days. Official figures indicate that 243 people had died of COVID-19 in the last 7 days. 49,128 PCR tests and 23,619 antigen tests had been carried out during this period. Meanwhile, the National Committee on COVID-19 Deaths says PCR tests won't be mandatory on all deaths.
There is no need to conduct PCR tests mandatorily on all COVID-19 deceased. If that is necessary, the Director General of Health Services has issued a circular saying it can be done at the discretion of the Judicial Medical Officer after the body is brought to the hospital. We propose to adopt a linear policy in terms of cremation and burials over this. We are holding discussions regarding this matter.
Today marks 34 years since the assassination of film actor and politician Vijay Kumarathunga. A ceremony was held in remembrance of him in Sidhuwa today.
Former President Chandrika Kumarathunga was among those who paid floral tributes to the statue of Vijay Kumarathunga in Sidhuwa after engaging in religious observances today. Jeevan Kumaratunga and other family members were present at the ceremony. The current situation portrays a breakdown in the political and economic sectors. A proper solution must be found for this rather than temporary solutions. I feel the current administration has failed to provide a proper solution.
Moving on to news overseas, tensions between the US and Russia are rising amidst concerns of a rising invasion on Ukraine. Newsfirst's Azra Hassan has been following these developments closely.
US President Joe Biden made a special speech to the people yesterday. A shift in his attitude was slightly different when it comes to the fact that Russia will be invading Ukraine. The imminent attack that he referred to in the past has now become a possible attack.
US President Joe Biden yesterday said he would not deploy the US military to fight against Russia if it invades Ukraine.
And the fact remains, right now, Russia has more than 150,000 troops encircling Ukraine and Belarus and along Ukraine's border. An invasion remains distinctly possible. If Russia does invade in the days and weeks ahead, the human cost for Ukraine will be immense. And the strategic cost for Russia will also be immense. While I will not send American servicemen to fight in Ukraine, we have supplied the Ukrainian military with equipment to help them defend themselves.
However, Russian President Vladimir Putin has said Russia does not want a war in Europe. He had said that his security concerns must be addressed and taken seriously.
Russia says it's withdrawing troops along the Ukrainian border. However, Western powers, including American President Joe Biden, are still skeptical about this. Amidst the speculation, a Black Hawk helicopter of the US Army was spotted picking passengers from a black SUV along the Poland-Ukrainian border.
Russia said today that it had finished military exercises in the occupied territory of Crimea and was withdrawing troops. Scenes shown on state television also showed military units, including tanks and artillery, crossing a bridge from Crimea to the Russian mainland. But observers and Western leaders remain skeptical of Russian claims and have warned that Russia could still invade its southern neighbor. Meanwhile, a Black Hawk helicopter of the US Army was spotted picking passengers from a black SUV on the Poland-Ukraine border. Foreign media reported that its destination was a hospital in Poland, where it arrived shortly after midnight.
Ukrainians celebrated today as a day of unity after the president declared the day when Western powers kept on insisting that Russia will invade Ukraine today.
Ukrainians were seen unfolding a 200-meter-long national flag at the National Olympic Stadium to celebrate Unity Day. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had asked the people of the country to hang national flags, put on blue and yellow ribbons, and show their unity to the whole world. The state flag of Ukraine was raised on buildings in all populated localities as well. Prince Andrew is facing fresh calls to be stripped of his Duke of York title. He had agreed on an undisclosed financial settlement with a woman who accused him of sexually assaulting her when she was just 17. Virginia Giuffre is a U.S. campaigner who offers support to victims of sex trafficking. The surprise out-of-court agreement means Prince Andrew makes no admission of guilt over the claims made by Virginia Giuffre, which he had repeatedly denied and only weeks ago vowed to fight in a U.S. civil trial. The Queen last month stripped Andrew of his military affiliations and royal patronages in an attempt to distance the royal family from the allegations. However, he has kept
kept his Duke of York title. The Queen is to foot part of the bill for Prince Andrew's sexual abuse lawsuit, which could end up costing some £12 million. The Queen is said to have been set to help fund the settlement, which was agreed between lawyers. The move is understood to be a bid to draw a line under the scandal before her much-anticipated Jubilee celebrations later this year, which he will apparently be banned from attending.
And with that, it's a wrap of Primetime News here on TV1. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Yuki Pasha, along with our sign language interpreter Brandon Cruz via Zoom. Take care and good night.